Hello, my name is Carl Surrey and this is a video tutorial for two Facebook groups, fans of Serif software and the Affinity Designer and Photo group. This Affinity Photo tutorial is an adaptation of a Photoshop tutorial that was written in a magazine called Practical Photography, and it is about making a sort of arty abstract reflection image. And they used a picture of a tower, so I'm sort of copying that sort of idea, but it doesn't have to be a tower. I mean, it could be a cityscape or whatever you want, really. And this is one of my first practice attempts where I got the two images and also a texture, which is a metal texture with all these scratches on. One of my second practice runs, I used a rusty metal sheet texture, and that also added a bit of sort of colour rather than just having it black and white. So it's just showing you there's various ways that you can go with this idea. So let me shut those two down. And the two images that I'm going to use, and all these images that I've used I've got from Pixabay.com, and I will add the links to the ones I'm using in this video now to the description in the YouTube description area. So this first one is of Antwerp, and the second one is obviously the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and I'm going to try a different metal texture. This or could even be ice. I'm not 100% certain what this is supposed to be. Right, the only thing I would say, and they don't say this in the video, but I would suggest that maybe that if you're going to take a picture of your local area, be it a tower or whatever, it might be a good idea to have the reflection a very well-known iconic image. So your friends and relations will see your local area and think, oh, you know, I know what that is, but most people wouldn't. But if you use an iconic image for your reflection, then other people will look at it and they will know exactly what it is from the get-go, even if they don't know the top half. So that's my thinking behind that. They don't say that in the tutorial, but this is why I picked the Eiffel Tower to be the reflection of this tower in Antwerp, which I've never seen and I didn't even know existed. So that gives you a reason to actually look at the image a bit more closely because of the iconic Eiffel Tower. So let us start. Now again, in the tutorial, because the gentleman doing the tutorial knew the image sizes that he was working with, he set out a size to start the project, but I didn't know the size when I started this of the images that I would be using, and I don't know the sizes of the images that you are going to be using. But it's probably a good idea to start with an area bigger than you think you need, in case you need to stretch and alter the image sizes so they match together. So I would suggest starting with a fairly big area, and the size that the person used in the original tutorial was 40 centimeters by 30 centimeters, and that seems to me quite a good place to start. So I'll go up, File, New, so it's 40 centimeters by 30 centimeters, and you can set the centimeters from this menu here, and 300 dpi, and just click OK. So we now have this new document, and the first one I'm going to use is the Antwerp one. So I'm just going to right click that, do copy, come back to my new document, and then edit and paste. You don't have to do this, but I'm just going to rename this Antwerp, and then I'm going to come and get the Eiffel Tower image, copy that, edit, paste, and then I'll rename this Paris. Right, so we've now got those two images in place. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip this image over, so making sure that it's the Paris level that I've got highlighted, and arrange, flip vertically, and then come to the move tool, and I'm also going to lower the opacity of this down to about 50%, just so I can see where I'm positioning this, and I'm going to then lower this down. I don't want to go too low so the top of the Eiffel Tower is missing, but I also want to have a sort of fairly good line across here. What I will do is I will just alter the size slightly just so they are the same size. There we go. And also obviously you want the two towers to line up so it looks like it is a reflection of the one of the other, and I think that's okay. I'm going to leave it there, I think. Right, I'm not going to bring the opacity back up just yet. First, what I want to do is to add a layer mask to the Paris image. So I'll just click on this icon here at the bottom. So there, you can see this now. This white square icon is added to the Paris layer, and it is the layer mask that is highlighted. Why I haven't increased the opacity of this yet is so I can see what I'm doing in the next part, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the rectangle marquee tool, and I'm going to draw out a section here that I want to delete off, so where you have the join. So I'm going to start up here, and then it's just a case of how far up you want the image to join together. So I'm going to go for about there, I believe. Okay, yes, I quite like that. And as it is a layer mask that we are still on, if I come to the paintbrush tool, and black is the foreground color, I can now paint over that area, and it will only affect the area inside that rectangled selection. Doesn't matter if you paint all over here, it will have no effect whatsoever. Let me increase that opacity up to 100% just to make sure I've got all of it off. There we go, much better. And once you're happy with that, you can just press Ctrl and D to get rid of the selection area. Right, I can now highlight the top Paris layer and increase the opacity back up to 100%, and I will just click on the icon for the layer mask again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just change the brush from the basic selections to the textured ones, and I'm just going to pick the first one, come back to the colour to make sure that it's black, that it's still the foreground colour, and I'm just going to sort of paint along this line here just to sort of break it up a bit so it's not all sort of a hard straight line join between the two halves of this image, just so it's not so obvious that there are like two joined images. So hopefully you can see that it works. I do like the fact that this reflection of the trees is in here, and to my mind it works quite well. So let me just highlight that top layer again. So what I'm going to do is I'm just double checking that is the icon for the image that is highlighted. It should have the white bounding box around it, and then I'm going to invert the image, and to do that, if I come up to layer and invert, you can either just do Control and I, or you can do it via this way, and that will turn that into sort of a negative type image. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to come to the adjustment layer and HSL adjustment, and then I'm just going to take out all the color by dropping that down to -100, and then I'm going to merge that into the layer so the top half is still in color and the bottom half is black and white. But I am going to alter the Antwerp one to black and white in the same sort of way. I'm going to come to adjustment, HSL, take all the color out, and then merge that one in. So I could have done it in one movement without merging, but it does give you an option to alter each half separately if you want to tinker a little bit that way. Right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to highlight the Paris layer, and I'm going to sort of tinker with the contrast of the image, and I'm going to use the levels adjustment, and I'm going to just move the white level slightly to the left, about 92ish. There we go. And I'm going to move the gamma slightly to the right. You remember we're affecting, although I'm on the top level here, we're actually affecting the bottom part of the image. And then it's just a case of suiting your personal taste and the actual image that you're using as to how dark you want to go. I'm going to leave that on roughly about there, which is 1.805. And again, I will just merge that into that layer. As you can see, I'm not affecting the layer above. So now I can click on the Antwerp layer, add a levels adjustment, and again alter the two halves of the image separately so it suits your personal taste. So this time I'm going to move the black just to darken it a bit. I'll move down to about 17% there, and the gamma I'm going to move probably not so much this time. We're at 1.107. That will do. It's a sort of much darker image. And then again, I'm going to merge those two together. So the next thing I want to do, and you don't have to do this, is all down to personal taste. That is to either dodge and burn the join or other parts of the image to lighten or darken selected areas. What I would do is I'll use the dodge tool first, and I'm going to set this on about 4%. You don't want these tools to be too high. 4% there, and I'm going to set this on to shadows like that, and I'm just going to go over, let's make sure I'm on the right layer first of all, yeah, Antwerp layer, and I'm just going to go over the buildings to sort of help lighten that up a bit. And maybe these darker trees down here, just try and bring them out a little bit from the shadows. Because it's only 4%, it's only doing this very slowly. You don't want a very sudden change of shading, so it may take a bit of time, but it's best to do this in small stages. Right, so then I'm going to click and highlight the Paris layer, and this time I'm going to use the burn brush tool and the midtones, and again at 4%, and I'm just going to go over the tower and some of these tree areas here, just to sort of darken them down a little bit. I'm not going to go too mad with that, I'll just leave it at that, I think. Yes, I'm happy with that. Okay, now we want our texture. So I'm going to come to the texture that I've selected, right click, copy, come back to this image and then edit and paste. Now if I come to the move tool, you can see this image is not big enough this way, but it's too big that way, but that doesn't really matter that much. I'm just going to stretch this down that way, move it over like that. Whichever texture you select, I mean, just make sure it fits okay, or the area of textures are where you want them. And then I'm just going to change the blending mode to soft light. Now as you can see, where the two images I was using earlier are smaller than the actual original, the background document, this area has only got the texture on it, but we can crop that out later. So you can either, I could bring this right in or stretch it out, depending on how you want the texture to look behind your image. Yes, I think I'll leave that like that. Right, also another thing, if you are using a texture that has some colour in it, like when the one which I used in my practice run, which was the rusty metal image, the rust was all red and what have you, so I just used the HSL adjustment on this particular layer and took all the colour out. I don't need to with this texture because it is basically black and white anyway, but if you do use a coloured texture, you may want to knock the colour out of it before you sort of carry on. Again, you can lower the opacity of this layer so you've only got a little bit of texture coming through, or leave it 100 and have a lot of texture. I'm just going to lower mine down to about 70%. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, again, this is a personal choice, you don't have to. If you like how your image looks at this point, you can sort of just crop it and save it. But I'm going to duplicate that layer, and I'm going to change the blend mode of this duplicated layer to screen. And again, I can lower the opacity down. Let's go down to about 40%. And then I'm going to add a layer mask to this duplicated screen layer. Now you can either, before you make the layer mask, you can hold down the Alt key and then click on the logo to make it a black layer mask, or if you just click on the layer mask icon and you have the white layer mask, you can just press Ctrl and I to change that into a black layer mask. And what that does is it hides the effect of that screen layer, and all we need to do now is to paint white onto the layer mask, making sure it's the layer mask that is highlighted, and you can just bring back some of that effect from the screen layer and just lighten up certain areas. I might lower the opacity down a bit so it's not so a sudden effect of the screen layer behind. So I'm just going to sort of highlight around the tower just to sort of lighten up that area, and a bit around those trees. Alright, I think that's enough for my personal tastes. How much of the screen layer you bring back, I will leave up to you. Right, now if you want to again make this darker sort of overall, you could add another levels adjustment, or even if you want to make it lighter, you don't have to make it darker, but I'm just going to nudge the gamma down slightly to about there. I don't have to merge it this time. So we're pretty much getting near to the end of this. Again, if you wanted to add a hint of color, you can come to the adjustment layer, and down the bottom there should be lens filter. Now by default it has this sort of orange color, but you can change the color. You should be able to come to the sliders and then sort of make it a blue color this time rather than yellow. There we go. I think that's, you can even add a bit of noise to that if you wanted to, but there's quite enough noise there with the texture that I was using anyway. So, and again you can alter the intensity of that blue. You can just have a subtle hint of blue or whatever color you pick. Let me take this up to about there. There we go. So that is pretty much the end of the tutorial. All you need to do now is to crop the image down to the size that you want. Just bring this edge in slightly, and then once you have it in position, just double click in the middle somewhere, and that is the finish of this tutorial. So all you need to do now is to save it and or export it under a new name, and hopefully you've enjoyed that. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.